We are a group of service users at Cygnet Hospital Bierley, and we wanted to explore the impact of stigma towards mental health.
We asked other service users about their experiences with being stigmatised and interviewed 2 mental health professionals to share their knowledge and understanding.
We also looked at the different elements of stigmatisation and identified 2 fundamental types of stigma. These are: external stigma is discrimination by others. It is when you treat others differently because of their mental illness. People make difficulties worse by staring, laughing and whispering. This knocks confidence. Stigma violence occurs in many places such as workplace, the education system, public hospitals and social media. People discriminate by turning people down for jobs and other opportunities that arise. People judge others due to their mental health. People enact these judgments in both physical, emotional and verbal ways. Unfair treatment occurs when people are stigmatised, which can involve name-calling such as freak, weird and crazy.
Internal stigma is when people neglect their needs due to self-stigmatisation. People feel shame due to the expectations of the norms of society, where they're usually discriminated against. Due to being stigmatised against, people are reluctant to seek help. People assume they're going to be judged due to their mental illness, so they take it upon themselves to treat themselves differently.
I once felt stigmatised at school when my teacher said I couldn't go to a self-harm group because my schoolwork is more important.
Having my primary diagnosis of bipolar disorder was met with a lot less stigma than my secondary diagnosis of personality disorder. I believe this to be due to public figures talking more openly about bipolar disorder and less knowledge surrounding personality disorder.
During my life, I've definitely felt stigmatised due to my mental illness. For example, one time I was in hospital and a member of staff said to me, "No one will ever love me because I have self-harm scars."
I've often felt stigmatised due to my mental health. For example, when I was in college, I got told that I couldn't remain studying due to missing work from being in hospital and actively self-harming.
There have been times when I have felt afraid of speaking about my difficulties in fear of being stigmatised, in particular during job interviews.
One time, a police officer said to me, "I don't understand how anyone could ever be sympathetic to suicidal people because it's completely selfish."
I have been stigmatised due to my mental health. I felt isolated due to people discriminating against my health. and often felt lonely when stigma has occurred in public and often on social media. Sometimes it feels like a million people are around you, but you still feel alone. I have been stigmatised due to my mental health. I felt isolated due to people discriminating against my health, and often felt lonely when stigma has occurred in public and often on social media. Sometimes it feels like a million people are around you, but you still feel alone.
When I think back to what my friend said, never judge a book by its cover, is what she told me. So when you're looking at me, don't judge me, for I know who I am, what I've been, who I've seen, what I've seen.
We wanted to interview some clinical professionals in order to gain a better understanding of stigma in mental health.
As a doctor specialising in psychiatry, what areas of mental health have you seen the most stigma in?
So mental health stigma can be divided into social stigma, which is a result of psychiatric label, and self-stigma. Self-stigma is mainly the result of internalizing their perception of discrimination, which can lead on to shame. Understanding the labels in psychiatry, I think, is of paramount importance in understanding the stigma in mental illness. Mental health professionals have used labels or diagnoses in order to describe individuals with mental illness. They classify the disorders for research and clinical utility. However, this has a negative impact upon social stigma as well as self-stigma. It is known from literature that, for example, patients with schizophrenia have been described as aggressive or unpredictable and dangerous. Patients with depression often described as being lazy. Patients with personality disorder as manipulative or unlikely to improve. And those with addictions, drug or alcohol addictions, have often been blamed for their own addictions. And all this stigma prevents the individual from seeking or adhering to treatment, from finding employment, and from living a successful life in community.
Have you come across stigma towards your profession?
Yes, I think the past psychiatric history and the history of psychiatry is partly to be blamed for some of today's misconceptions about mental illness. For example, some of terminology, like patients being described as lunatics or hysterics or psychos. Some of the image of the hospitals, of psychiatric hospitals, being these locked institutions at the outskirts of communities, the controversial medical practices such as ECT, insulin shock, or lobotomy, the physical restraints and coercion that was practiced in the past have contributed to these current misconceptions of maybe the treatment is not working, it's not effective, it's addictive and damaging towards the patient. That psychiatrists are not real doctors, or they are enforcing treatment upon their patients, and that maybe psychiatric illness is different or special from any other illnesses. However, psychiatry, I think, has moved away from these dark centuries, and it's based on a more holistic approach and collaborative approach with the patient these days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How would you define stigma from a psychological perspective?
So stigma tends to be a form of discrimination or prejudice against a particular group, typically based on social stereotypes. So that could be a range of characteristics. It could be someone's gender or their age or ethnicity, religion, and also mental health. Typically it's often the dominant group towards either a minority or a more oppressed group, because the dominant group's views are taken as the norm. And then the lesser group is kind of seen as different in some way. Psychologically, we tend to differentiate between two types. You've got public stigma or society stigma, which is what we kind of talked about. But then there's often a process by which people can internalise that stigma. So instead of believing it about other people, they actually believe it about themselves.
Yeah. What psychological impact does stigma have on people's well-being?
It can have a range of impacts. I suppose kind of thinking widely, it tends to impact on people's access to resources or relationships. So for example, thinking about mental health again, you might find that people are disadvantaged when it comes to jobs. So people might discriminate, they might have particular views about people with mental health, that they're either unreliable or they won't be able to do the job, so they may lose out on a job. There might be relationships. If you actually disclose to someone that you've had mental health problems or that you have a diagnosis, people might be prejudiced against that. Yeah. And I suppose to a really extreme sense, you might even have forms of abuse against you. I think we've all kind of witnessed people in the street with people making fun of them, maybe if they've, talking to themselves and things like that. So I suppose that's kind of the external side of it. But I suppose working as a clinical psychologist, what we tend to think about more working one-to-one with people is the internalised stigma. Yeah. So if you think there's this kind of a process by which a person can become aware of society's stigmas, they can then agree with them. So actually there might be a view that people with mental health problems are dangerous or weak in some way. I think they're kind of the common ones that people get. And then they agree with them, and then when they have mental health problems themselves, they apply it to themselves. And they go, not just that other people are weak, but I'm weak, and possibly that I'm dangerous. And understandably, that has a significant impact on the way people view themselves and how they feel about themselves.
Can you talk to us a bit about institutionalised stigma?
Yes, I can. When I was 14, I'd been involved with the police several times, and I was sent a letter summoning me to court and informing me that if I didn't come, I would be fined and put in prison. So I was, very afraid of that happening. So I went to court with an interpreter in the court. In the court, I was sat there and I was told to stand up, and they told me that I had a personality disorder. And I asked what that meant, and I said, well, that's funny, I don't have one of them. So through the interpreter, they explained that meant it would involve drugs and alcohol, knives and guns and things like that. And I said, what? No. I haven't got a personality disorder. I just behave badly. A teenage thing. So I dismissed it, and the court just went, oh well, we're not going to talk about that with you. And I thought, that's not very nice. I felt discriminated against because I was deaf.
Do you feel there is any stigma associated with being deaf within mental health hospitals?
Yes, I do. Because I've been here a long time, 2 years. I should have been here after the JDU for a short period of time, but there's been a problem. Deaf hospitals, there aren't any where I can move to, and I feel like I've been dumped here and kept here. And she's deaf, she's all right. Overhearing other patients are leaving quickly. They're like discriminating against me because I'm deaf and I'm being, kept here, and I feel like there's a lack of empathy. I think that they don't understand how I feel.
We have come to Leeds City Centre to interview members of the public to get an insight into people's opinions in and around mental health.
What is your experience of mental health?
I've had issues with my own mental health. I've been depressed. I would say I still am, but it comes in waves now. I don't really know how to define good mental health. I have good days and bad days, but overall, I'm relatively mellow, I'd say. Can't say I've really had much of a stigma with it. I mean, there's people in my own family that don't understand what I'm going through, so they don't really understand how it is to deal with it. But overall, most of the people I have spoken to have been really supportive because they understand what I'm going through and can offer any support that I need. And
That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing. What is your experience of mental health?
Well, recently I did suffer depression, so I ended up having a psychiatrist and a counsellor to help me through it. So yeah, like I have experienced it, and I know people who have as well.
Yeah. Have you experienced any stigma towards your mental health?
Yeah, I have actually. Like people think it's for attention. They think it's you're just putting it on. Like you can't put it on. Like fair enough, people can put it on, but like. And people do make silly things up. If you haven't got it, you're like, when you've got that stigma towards you, you're just like...
Does it make you reluctant to talk about things and
yeah.
to get to seek help?
Yeah, well that's why I never like sought help, and then obviously it got to the point where it was like, right, it needed to happen now. Yeah, now or never.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah, it's alright.
That's great.